Is the pious loved by the gods because it is pious, or pious because it is loved by the gods? In more modern terms, is the right right because God commands it, or does God command it because it is right? This was the question that Socrates asked his friend Euthyphro in one of Plato's main dialogues. The Euthyphro Dilemma is perhaps the biggest challenge that theists have faced over the centuries in establishing a religiously based morality. Since its inception, religion has been the primary source of moral precepts in pretty much every society, but people have rarely stopped and asked themselves the things Socrates was so curious about. Why are God's commands right? Is loving your neighbor right just because God says so, for instance? Or does God say so because it is right? This dilemma puts many people in a really tough spot because whichever answer you give is problematic. If loving your neighbor is right because God says so, then this means that things are right simply because God says that they are right. By this standard, if God were to say that killing innocent children is right, that would automatically make it so. Admitting this would imply a massive amount of arbitrariness in morality that almost no one is ready to concede. On the other hand, if God says that loving your neighbor is right because it is the right thing to do, then that means that loving your neighbor was already right before God said it. In other words, the rightness of loving your neighbor is independent of God's commands. Equally problematic, admitting this would mean that, contrary to what many religious subscribers believe, moral rightness does not in fact come from God. As is naturally expected, many prominent theologians and philosophers of religion have jumped in and provided solutions to this astonishingly cryptic problem. One such response, provided by American philosopher William Alston, answers affirmatively to the dilemma's first question. Is the right right because God commands it? Yes, it is, Alston says, and this doesn't imply any arbitrariness. Although it does entail that if murder were to be commanded by God, this would make murder right, this would not happen in the first place because God would refrain himself from doing so by virtue of the fact that he is good. But what does good mean? Wouldn't God stopping himself from commanding murder because he is good imply that he is himself obeying moral principles of rightness that are external to him? Alston answers in the negative, claiming that it is not that God is good, but God is the good. God is the essence of good itself. So whatever he claims to be right through his commands does not come about from his obeying some external principle of goodness, but by him freely acting in his intrinsic nature. There are no principles forcing God to be good, because he is himself the source of goodness out of which the principles emanate in the first place. A considerable amount of doubt has been shed on this answer, with some people claiming that it only pushes back the problem one level above. The problem with saying that God is the good itself is that it leaves no further room to explain in virtue of what God is the good itself. Since God is the origin of goodness, the starting point of his existence, so to speak, then there is no space in which you can say God is good because X or God is good because Y. It is an explanatory stopgap of sorts that leaves a great deal of questions on the table. So does it hold up? I claim it does not, due to its heavy reliance on circular reasoning. But maybe you disagree. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and see you next time.